joined today by Amy Barry.
Hello,
Welcome.
thanks for having me.
Very welcome. Looking forward to this conversation for many reasons. We're going to talk about some of the nuances of retail and retail marketing and the bit I'm particularly interested in, the management and leadership aspects that you've learnt over your career. But before we get into that, let's go back. Let's go let's go back to the beginning.
Well,
Um, was marketing always on the agenda for you? Did you know that was going to be your path, as it were?
no, I had no idea, and I still feel like I have no idea which direction I'm headed. I think the most hated question I get is, "Where do you see yourself in 5 years?" I studied a bit of everything when I was growing up. I did a lot of sciences. I liked the facts and the figures behind things. I like having an answer to things. But I was always a reader and a nerd for stories as well. So as I went through later years of high school, I had a bit of a combo of everything. And probably one of those early turning points was that we had a bunch of extracurricular committees that you could join. And weirdly, there was a public relations one in the year 2000 at my high school.
Wow.
And I went, oh, this sounds like a bit of fun. And my PR friends will cringe when they hear what it was, which was pretty much printing out multicolored posters to go around the school to tell people what was happening. But there was something about that that really sort of stuck with me. And when I looked up the courses around that, it was basically, do you love talking and do you love writing? And I'm like, well, yes, both of those for sure. So I ended up doing a PR degree. However, there was something missing from that. So I also majored in marketing. And that was where I really sort of went, this is the combo. This is the combo of all of the data stuff that I've loved, as well as that storytelling stuff and finding a way through. So did my degree straight through, landed my first marketing job, which was very glamorous in a carpet manufacturer in Geelong. I'm a Geelong girl, so that made life pretty easy, but it was not perhaps what I thought my first grad role would be. I think you do tend to get given a couple of furphies coming out of uni that, you're going to be wildly qualified and have all these important things to do straight up. And that certainly wasn't my experience. It was a great experience where I worked at Godfrey Hirst, but there were a lot of real world truths that I learned in those first 18 months. And I was really, really keen to travel. I'd always been keen to travel, but I wanted to do the grown up responsible things first, finish my degree, get a couple of years behind me. So once I'd done that, I headed off overseas backpacking around Europe for 6 months. Then, of course, ran up the credit card bill and ran out of money. So I had to come back to the real world.
Reality
Oh,
hits.
and
Yeah.
it's brutal when it hits, right? But yeah, I was ready to come back and ready to really get stuck into something and came up against probably my first real roadblock in my career, which is no one wanted me. And I was trying my guts out for a good, I think, 3 months. I was I was going for almost graduate roles, sort of marketing coordinator roles. I was driving everywhere from Geelong right across to the Mornington Peninsula to go to interviews. And I just couldn't get a foot in the door, even though I had 18 months experience. Fortunately, I ended up landing a 3-month temp contract with the Good Guys, who were based out in Airport West at that time, just before the Tullamarine Airport there. And that really set me on my path. I do believe that you sort of end up where you're supposed to in life. And thank God I ended up there, because that was 10 years of my life after that point. So 3-month contract turned into a permanent role within the local area marketing team. Really interesting business that I walked into at that point. The Good Guys was a joint venture partnership, which meant that the family owned 50% of every store, and then each proprietor in the store owned 50% as well. So
Well, that's interesting.
yeah,
That's actually a really clever model.
it was incredible. It
Yeah.
meant that I had a lot of people to learn from, both within the support group, because we weren't a head office, but also from the guys and girls out in the stores. And in my role in the local area team, we were the main conduit between what was happening at the stores and what we needed to get done from a national brand point of view. So that was my first introduction, I think, to not fluffy marketing. We had to have facts behind everything. We had to have a really great reason for why we wanted to do things. And, here's little old me, 25, I think I was at the time, 24, 25, jumping on the phone with someone who's been in the retail game for 30 years, trying to convince them that I should be allowed to spend their money. I think they should expand their catalog
Yeah.
distribution area. I think they should have a go at some local press advertising, whatever it happened to be. So that was a great introduction to the world of marketing, but also the real reality of how it plays into a whole business, which was great.
Kind of baptism of fire, that one, isn't it? You kind of
It was
bit of sink or swim there that obviously worked out well for you.
Oh, absolutely. And there were some absolute characters as well. And you couldn't be shy about it. You had to jump on the phone. It was one of the first places I figured out that when you did have a difficult person to deal with, hiding behind an email doesn't get anything done. You're better off on the phone. It's a lot harder to be not nice in person anyway.
Absolutely.
And there's no tone on an email, so it's really hard to communicate things. Whereas having an understanding tone, even when you're delivering news the other person doesn't want to hear, that will get you a long way, I think, in building that relationship. So that was really interesting. I worked my way up there to become a senior coordinator, managing or at least delegating between other people within the team. And then a little while after that, I moved into another role, which was a marketing development role where I worked with stores who were struggling. And so I would go out to the stores with a group of other people from different departments, have a look at their competitive nature, what was going on within the store itself, and just make some recommendations. And then a little while after that, I was promoted to advertising manager. And that was a whole different gig. And that was probably through retail marketing in that sense, because I was managing the team that were putting together all of the product and price advertising for national campaigns. So catalogues, TV, radio, that sort of thing. So we were working directly with the merchants, who was really the engine room of most retail businesses in that sense. And that was very much a baptism of fire. And all of that work, learning how to manage different personalities and difficult personalities, really came to the fore at that point. So I was managing a team of 4, which was a first for me. Previously, as I said, it was more delegation than management. Now I had people problems. My people were having people problems. We had deadlines every week. At that point, the Good Guys were in both Australia and New Zealand, and we were churning through about 80 catalogues a year. And that was everything from a 12-page tabloid right up to a 40-page quarto. So
that's huge.
Massive amounts of work that we're going through, a lot of stress. And in retail, things can just, turn on a dime. So you have to be quite reactive and be happy and ready to be reactive and change really quickly.
Yeah.
So that was fun. And then just to keep adding to things, I picked up a few other things in the world of national promotions. So we did a lot of competitions and gift with purchase programs at the Good Guys to try and incentivize customers to either level up their purchases or buy additional products. We also had finance opportunities. We got into the kitchen cabinetry business at one point. So I really got exposed to a lot of different ways to entice customers to come and shop with our store, which was fantastic. So that was about 5 roles within 10 years. And at that point, I decided it was a good idea to expand. So off I went, and I landed at the Spotlight Retail Group with Anaconda, which is a sporting goods, camping, hiking, fishing, that kind of thing, national retailer. And that was really interesting because I'd been at the Good Guys for 10 years. I had built up a lot of goodwill and a bit of a reputation, I think. And now all of a sudden I was somewhere and no one had any idea who I was. So
go start all over again.
Yeah. And that is horrible in so many ways, but also really freeing in a lot of ways as well, because I had a bunch of people who'd seen me as that junior coming through, and so it took a long time to convince them that I was a capable human. And then at Anaconda, I realized one day that no one knew any backstory about me. So I just had to back my voice and show that I was confident in making decisions. So I started there on a 12-month contract. And within that first 12 months, I was made permanent again. So that was really fantastic. And I was at Anaconda for just under 5 years. We acquired another brand during that time that I managed, which was Mountain Designs, an Australian higher end, sort of more premium outdoors and clothing brand, which was fantastic. And then towards the end of my time there, I also worked across a couple of the major deals that we were doing as a marketing team, because at Spotlight Retail, we had one sort of central marketing team and worked across a multitude of different brands, including Spotlight, Anaconda, and in the later days, Harris Scarf, which was really great. So media tenders and a whole bunch of other big projects, which was great. And then after I left there, I landed in the world of supplier land, which was a bit different for me. So I stepped back from the forefront of retail. So I'm now at Glen Dimplex, which is an Irish company. and no one's heard of it here, which is kind of great. But
No.
they probably know a lot of the brands that we work with. So we have a bunch of kitchen appliance brands in Technica, Euromaid, Belling, small appliances in Morphy Richards. We've got heating and cooling brands, Nobo, Dimplex. We've got flame brands, so Real Flame and Nectar, Massport, wood, gas, and electric fireplaces. And we also have barbecues now, infrared barbecues in Crossray and outdoor heating for heat strips. So lots of different brands. And it's been a real education, I think, being a step back. One of the things I loved about retail was we could have something in market in less than a day. We could really change our own fortunes and really drive traffic, sales, whatever it was that we were looking for. When you're a step back, it takes a lot longer to be able to influence the outcome of anything. But certainly having that understanding of customers and also how retailers work has certainly helped me in my current role for sure. So right now I'm head of marketing and customer experience. So I head up the team that looks after all of those brands. We also have a couple of showrooms around Australia, and I look after the consumer support team, which is our call center, who take all of the calls direct from customers when they're having problems, unfortunately, and we see how we can help them and turn their experience into something positive.
It's so interesting that both of your longer term, I was going to say roles, not roles, but the organizations you worked for longer term started as contracts.
I know.
Because I think, because I think often it's become a bit of a cliche, and I use it all the time, but I think the reason it's become a cliche is that it's actually true. That it's so often contracts turn into longer term roles, particularly in larger organizations. It's just a great way to kind of get your foot in the door, show what you can do, and also for you to experience the organization and the culture, and for you to decide whether it's somewhere that you want to be long term, and for them to get a sense of what you're capable of. And I think so often those opportunities turn into, as you said, 3 months turned into 10 years. It's really cool.
Yeah, it was great. I probably didn't think about it too much when I was first starting. I just wanted to get in somewhere, to do something, to get some traction. Leaving the Good Guys after 10 years and going to something that was quite temporary. I remember speaking to my husband about that, going, oh, is this the right thing? Am I being a bit crazy here? But I remember one of my managers earlier on, because I'd seen it happen a few times as well after me at the Good Guys and Anaconda. Businesses don't let go of talent. So if you can prove yourself, if you can bring value to the role, if you can move through more work, produce better work, identify opportunities, the business will find somewhere to put you, especially to your point, being in a bigger business.
I think so. And I think as well, just that backing yourself and kind of in a weird way, you sort of paint yourself into a corner because you're like, well, I've got to make it work now, haven't I?
Yes.
And I think in some ways that could actually be really helpful. And yeah, I've seen it so many times over the years. And I think people often, certainly people in permanent roles, can often understandably discount that as an option or as a way forward. But I do actually think it's really worth considering. And prime example, you never know where you're going to end up with
yeah,
that.
absolutely. They'll put their claws in you and get stuck there for quite some time. No, I agree. And I think when you feel like it's the right time to move, it's kind of, here's a weird analogy. I think it's kind of like dress shopping. When you need to find the perfect dress for the perfect occasion, it's never there.
You can't find it.
However, if you're strolling through on a day that you weren't particularly shopping for it, there'll be a cracking one just sort of sitting in the corner. I think it's the same with job hunting. By the time you get to that point where you are desperate to go somewhere new, have, just a different environment or different thinking around you, the perfect job is never going to present itself. So being open to all those different opportunities, you just don't know where they're going to lead.
Yeah, I think so. You touched on before as well that I think what is absolutely one of the nuances of retail, that immediacy of what you're it's a nice way of putting it, isn't it? It's a polite word, immediacy. Read chaos.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the things that people who perhaps haven't worked in that space before, like, you hear it and you go, oh, yeah, retail's fast paced, like everyone says that. But then the reality of what that actually means, putting something out weekly, 80 catalogues a year. So many of the retail sort of EDMs that I am signed up for, I get one every day. I mean, that is a huge volume of work that someone is having to get through to put that content out. Did you, I suspect you spent so long there. Did you come to love it? Like it just became part of what was normal every day?
Yeah, I think it's probably the same as anyone who works in a high pressure environment is you develop a bit of a black humor towards it, but there's very much a we're in the trenches together scenario. I know when I was at Anaconda, where we worked, there was a supermarket on the ground floor of our building. And we must have been the best customers going around because the lolly aisle got hit. There was never any donuts left in that area because everyone was just, they were the little sort of team support things that you did just to go, okay, guys, off we go again. Let's kind of crack forward. But it's a really interesting thing in retail. There are so many plans constantly. We're looking at data all the time. We're looking at what we did last year. We're taking input and information from our agency partners, some of the media partners as well, anyone who's got them to have a look at different ways that we can connect with our consumer. We're doing research on at least a yearly basis. And so we're constantly looking at plans and tweaking them. And Mondays are a day that I came to love and loathe in retail. It was trade day. So we had a look at where we landed after that week. And then we had a look at what we could impact in the next week and what we had to impact in the next couple of weeks to make sure that we were still on track. Christmas is one of the most brutal times, but it usually happens in about October. For sort of October,
Yeah.
November is when it's brutal for the marketing team because everything's getting
Yeah.
locked down. You are, racing to be able to finish off catalog pages and TV deals before the logs close and all of that sort of thing. So I think one of my roles, particularly the higher up that I went, was being a real cheerleader and an empathetic ear to those, particularly in the design teams. They're working their butts off, they're getting something done, and then we're going, okay, we got to draft 3 there. Sorry about it. We're now going to do this, and it's completely different. Trying to find a way to make people feel valued.
Yeah.
When it feels like their work is probably going nowhere, it was a really important thing, and to keep those lines of communication open, I think was really important as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a real challenge, just as you were saying that. I was thinking challenge from a strategy perspective, because there is the reality of the immediacy of the numbers are down, or our competitors on sale, or Christmas is around the corner, and how you balance those things, as you said, with the data, with the customer insights, with the longer term trends. It must be a real kind of tension that must almost be ongoing of how you balance those two things out.
Yeah. I would love to meet a marketer that doesn't have some form of a spirited discussion with their management team regarding short-term and long-term gain. If there's one out there, please reach out, because I would just love to know what your world is like. I don't know that there are many businesses that nail it. I think one thing I very much had to come to terms with was the role that marketing plays in a business, and it's different in every business. It's very different in the business I'm in now compared to when I was in retail. And we don't all get to work for those quote unquote marketing brand led businesses.
Yeah.
So it is frustrating. You have to pick your moments and you have to have your data lined up. You also have to understand the language of the business that you're talking to. So it's no good. I think it comes back to that lesson I learned as the 25-year-old on the phone to, someone up on the Sunshine Coast trying to convince them to spend $5,000 for the first time. You have to show a business and commercial outcome, even if it's long term. Hopefully you've done enough good work over that journey and you've brought the right information to get them to buy into that long term while still having parts of short term there.
Yeah.
But it's never all going to go your way. So that flexibility definitely needs to be there. I mean, I can think of, we got the first brand campaign in Anaconda's history across the line when I was there, which was really exciting. But the compromise on that was still showing the business what our short-term strategy was while we still built that long-term. And the brand saliency that we built, we saw it in the brand health metrics. We built consideration from 47% to 63% within a 2-year window, which is a fairly decent jump. And that was just by being consistent, which is a wacky idea in marketing, of course. But yeah, it's probably the thing that will frustrate me time and time again in this career, which is you just can't convince people of what's good for them sometimes.
No, and I think you made a absolutely critical point there about 2 points actually about a number of businesses, and I actually think it's a fairly reasonably high percentage that don't sort of fully understand marketing and what marketing can do. But then I think the part that marketers can play in that in exactly as you said, using the language of the business, using those business metrics. It's about results, deliverables, percentages, numbers, and actually presenting ideas in those, in that format and in that way. I think sometimes marketers can be a little bit guilty of not marketing their marketing that well, as it
Yeah,
were.
great point.
And actually, I think some of that disconnect is often around language, particularly if it's around brand. I think it becomes even more so because, certainly people that are perhaps more numbers oriented in businesses, they hear brand and their eyes glaze over and they think, oh great, all these intangible outcomes that we're never going to see and that I'm paying for. And I think, yeah, so much of bridging that gap is exactly as you said, language and understanding actually how to present those
Mm.
ideas. And also super interesting that you learned that in such a first-hand way. I'd imagine that had such an impact as you continue to grow through your career of actually having to have those conversations with people directly and it not being filtered through, the marketing manager to someone or, there you are as a 25-year-old
No
saying,
protection. Yeah.
yeah, I think in hindsight, although it was probably quite scary at the time, like it's actually a really key skill to have learned and to have picked up.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I'm not a shy person, I would say, but I don't think anyone enjoys having conversations where they know that they're delivering news that's not going to be received well, or they're
Yeah,
going to have to stand there and really justify their position. Because there is something I also had to learn, which was I can have a conversation and have a disagreement with someone about the work. That's not them disagreeing with me as a human, and it doesn't necessarily reflect on me because my great fear, as I uncover bits and pieces about myself, is being made to look like I don't know what I'm doing. Like I hate looking stupid in a room. So preparation was really key whenever you were going to have one of those bigger, broader conversations with the business. And it was just as important, to be honest, when I was jumping on the phone with, any of my
yeah,
JVPs. Making sure I understood what I was talking about, making sure I understood the implications for the rest of the business or for that
mm,
particular store. Yeah, you can't underestimate the amount of pre-work you have to do for that sort of thing. And I mean, you're right. It's about marketing. Marketing. What do? We know our audience. We have a message and we figure out a way to convey the message that is going to influence them. So, don't hide the stuff that they want to hear about at the back end because you want to talk about all of the gorgeous marketing fun things
yeah,
that we get excited about. Give them what they want and then tell them we're going to do the
yeah.
fun marketing stuff and we're both going to get what we want here.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think it was you said in your time at the Good Guys where you sort of moved into your first management leadership role, team of
Yeah.
four, I think you said. I always think that's such an interesting and very much kind of pivotal moment, but it can often be a little bit chicken and the egg, can't it? Of someone wants to move into a management or leadership role but doesn't have that experience yet. And it can be quite hard to get that experience when you haven't that experience and round we go. But interestingly, I think one of the ways that I have seen it probably work out more often than not for people is within the same organization because you've already built a level of trust. People know you're capable and you're probably more likely to be given the opportunity as opposed to trying to get into a new organization as a manager or leader when you haven't done that before. But yeah, interested in what that sort of looked like for you and how you kind of made that move and how that all came about.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you're 100% right. And I know there are a few times in my 10 years at the Good Guys, I'm like, is it now? Do I go now?
Mm,
What is that opportunity? And I'd seen people come in with less experience than me, who were on more money than me at points, who got better titles than I did, because that was important when you're coming up through. And
yeah,
I was really frustrated with that. But on reflection, it was that trust that allowed me to do things that I'd never done before, to take that to my next role, which I wouldn't have got without
mm,
all of the combination. Yeah, management's a funny thing, right? You think that that's where you want to go and what you want to do, but I put not a lot of time and energy into thinking about what that looked like, what I had to give. and how I was going to change what I was going to do on a daily basis, because I didn't just have to think about my own inbox and my own meeting schedule anymore. There were a lot of other things that happened. And interestingly, I was situated in the marketing department, which was in one part of one building, and my team were embedded within the merchandise department. So they were hearing what was happening in a completely different department. Again, in most retail landscapes, merch and marketing have a tempestuous at best relationship. We're both fighting to pull the right levers to make sure that we get the right outcome for the business, but there is going to be conflict there. And they were sort of left to deal with a lot of it by themselves, which I didn't realize quite early on, because a lot of the time you get a management position because you were good at what you were doing, not because you're great at helping people.
So true. Yeah.
So I was getting frustrated with my team in maybe that first sort of 6 months. I was asking for things the way I had been asked for them before. I had expectations on them in the way that I delivered things to my boss, or the way that I would work. And I was just really confused as to why they couldn't do it the same way. And gloriously, our CMO was very big into development, and so had done a few different things with us over the journey. But I was introduced to the DISC principle back then through I think it was a half-day workshop. And it just hit me like a lightning bolt in the middle there. I was in work, I was a high D, high I, probably more D than I. I was in a very decision-making sort of role at the time. And my 4 lovely humans were all solid S's. And I went, oh, okay. No wonder.
On the complete opposite side of the model.
Opposite.
Yes.
So I am task, I am fast, I am making decisions on the fly. Do not write me a Harry Potter email. I just want dot points. Come on, we need to get stuff done. And I would drop past their desk thinking I was doing the right thing. You know, here I am walking up the stairs, going to see them at their desk. The first thing out of my mouth was, so where are we at with page 12? And when I went back and I really read up on what was important to the people who were all about that steadiness, they are people focused. And it was really important to them that they felt like someone cared about them, like someone noticed them and was willing to listen to them and take time with them, because they were also people who like to consider things. So if I'm throwing out a quick question in a meeting, I'm expecting quick fire answers back. They don't want to do that. They want to sit with it, think about it, and then come back to me in a really measured way, which I'm kind of envious about because I don't have that skill. But so the first thing that I changed is when on a Monday morning, I would go up to each of their desks and I would go, hi, how are you? I did genuinely want to know how they were. I wanted to know how their weekends were. It's just when I walked in the door at work, my brain immediately went into task mode. So I just had to sort of flip it back to weekend Amy for a little bit to be able to have a conversation with people. And the results were almost instant. And everyone was a lot happier at work. I was a lot happier at work. They were a lot happier. I found out about a lot more problems before they became problems. They brought me into the loop on things that were uncomfortable for them. I think they figured out that they could use my skill set to help them with their problems, because a lot of the people in their world are very much a DI scenario as well. So we started having a lot of conversations, and my catchphrase was, if I don't know, I can't help. So I got a lot more feedback from them. And yes, I continue to use that DISC principle when I cannot figure out how to get through to someone, because 9 times out of 10, I figured out it's how I'm coming across to them. It's not necessarily their issue.
It's so interesting, isn't it? There's that, I was going to say quote, I don't know if that's the right terminology, but, you know, treat others as you would want to be treated.
Yes.
But in the specifics of leadership and management, like, it could not be more wrong.
Nightmare, isn't it?
Don't do that. You know, actually treat them as they would want to be treated, not as you would want. And I think it's so interesting because so often I've seen it quite a few times in my own career as well, that, and it's happened to me too, that you go into a management leadership position and you haven't necessarily had any training or help, and you're just kind of expected to figure it out. And so you're doing the best that you can and doing what you think is the right thing. And an intervention like that, and, you know, training and development more broadly, can just have such a huge impact. And we were chatting about it offline before, but in a distant past, 25 years ago, 23 years ago, something like that, I actually started my career in management training and worked extensively with the DISC behavioural model. I went over as, what would I have been, 23 probably, 24, maybe 23, went over to Atlanta and did my train the trainer with the lady who literally wrote the book on DISC. And I love it for the same reasons as you, that it was just really enlightening, and this sense of, almost feeling like you were speaking a foreign language to someone, of those, why can we just not get on the same, like, why are we just not communicating? And there is a tendency, I think, as humans, to kind of put that on the other person of why aren't they doing X, Y, Z? But exactly as you said, it's actually, well, why aren't I doing X, Y, Z? And actually, if I want to have an impact, I need to adapt to the other person. And I was smiling as you were describing those scenarios. It was a smile of recognition, because I too am a ID. I have been in those scenarios. And it was always so interesting, as you say, it's someone who it's always task first. It's not that you don't care about the person, but it's, in my head, in your head, task first. Yes, I'm interested to know what you did on the weekend, but let's talk about that afterwards. let's talk about the task.
We're here to
first.
get stuff done.
Whereas, yeah, exactly. Whereas the other person is thinking, wow, like, that's a bit blunt. That's a bit harsh. Like, do they not care about me? Do they not know it's Monday? Like, as you said, do they not care what I did? And one of the reasons that I liked DISC particularly, as opposed to something like a Myers-Briggs, which is just so much more complex, that it was relatively simple, but still a lot of value to be taken. But it was the way in which it gave you a real world language and a framework to be able to, as I said before, adapt to other people and really change those interactions. So yeah, cool to hear that you were using it too, and it had such an impact on you.
Yeah, totally drank the Kool-Aid all those years ago, and I still bring it out now when I've got other people who are going through a similar journey, and it's so great to have something like that I can share, because I talk about before not wanting to feel like an idiot. I genuinely, like, how's this not occurred to me before, that I should think about the other person? But it just, my whole career about, trying to get ahead was getting stuff done. And that was almost my personal brand of, I get stuff done. So you give me this, we will get it done. And it was an absolute eye-opener. I still use it today. I used it on my boss, actually. Hopefully he won't watch this. And I just...
Your secret's out now.
I know. Well, it hadn't occurred to me for some reason to use it with him. And I sent him a few things ahead of a meeting that I wanted to have. And we got so much done in that 45 minutes. I'm like, you're an idiot. He loves to consider things. Why haven't you sent him things a couple of days ahead? He's a very busy human. So yeah, it still pops up now.
Yeah, same. I obviously use it all the time as well. And I think it's, to your point before, I think it's just human nature, isn't it? We always default to seeing it from our perspective. It's, I think, just how we're all wired. But it's such a shift in, certainly in any sort of one-to-one interaction. Teams, I think it's huge. We used to do training on it in terms of sales and influencing as well. It's anything, literally any sort of human interaction, human communication. In my world these days, interviewing, it's a really kind of key thing in terms of, that sort of matching and mirroring piece as a shortcut to rapport, and pace of speech and volume is probably the easiest way to do that. And I think we all know, because it is real world, we all know kind of how it feels to be on the receiving end of that. Sometimes if you are someone who is perhaps a little bit quieter, a little bit slower in the way that you speak, a little bit more considered, and then someone else comes in and they're like, it kind of feels like a bit of a slap in the face.
Very much.
But as we said, the onus is on you to actually make that adjustment, and then normally what happens is a middle ground is kind of found, but you've got to kind of make that initial jump.
I think the thing is, it doesn't all have to go. It's not all one-way traffic. But the thing that I couldn't do is I couldn't crack through. I couldn't find that connection with someone, and that's where I've used it. And I think the other place that I've used it a bit would be to manage up. which was again another one of
Mm.
my big sort of aha moments in life coming through, which was, oh, my manager's not just there to manage me. They also have a whole day job, and I'm not the thing that they're thinking about all the time. Okay, but I still need to get stuff from them. How do they work? What is it that I could do to be able to put my stuff in front of them the way that they like to see it, so that I can, it's sort of a bit selfish, I guess, in that way, polite manipulation, I call it, but how can I put it in front of them to make sure that I get the stuff that I need?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so true. What have you learned along the journey in terms of what you've seen in leaders, managers that you've worked for that's been really impactful, that you've sort of seen a, I don't know, particular behavior or something and thought, oh, I'm going to steal that. I'm going to borrow that. Like that's a great idea.
Oh, yeah, there's probably a lot. And I think I started to collect those nuggets from the Good Guys onwards, a real mix of managers. And it's been really fun, I think, to reflect back on them. One of my all-time favorite managers, I would probably term a nurturer. Very caring, very understanding, always remembered everything about everyone, their family situations. One of the things that I loved most about working for them was they were very open about bring me problems and we'll solve them together. So you never had to be concerned if you stuffed something up, because as we all know, it's in the hiding of problems or errors that the
Yes.
real things,
Yeah.
yeah, the real trouble actually happens. So I,
Yes.
uh, I never had any fear when I went to them to say, hey, I've done something not quite right here. How do I do this? And the great thing was that there was no berating, there was no belittling. It was, okay, let's solve it first. So first problem was
Yeah.
solving it, and I got to ride shotgun on the solving. Oh, okay. You talk to this person, then we talk to this person, and then we do a little favor over here, and we fix it that way. Then we come back to the problem itself, and we figure out where that happened. Was it a process thing?
Yeah.
Was I just rushing through stuff because my attention to detail has always been horrific? And I really appreciated the calmness and the care that
Mm.
I was given in that space. It wasn't over nurturing, it wasn't spoon feeding by any means, but
Yeah.
um, you knew that you were safe. So that psychological
Yeah.
safety, I think, with your manager was really
Yeah.
important. And that manager actually pushed me forward for a role that I didn't think I was ready for, and I wasn't even in contention for within a business, because they were also really brilliant at seeing people's skill sets and being able to apply those in a real world scenario. So I was always very
Mm.
appreciative of that.
What was that conversation like out of interest when they sort of, I don't know, brought that opportunity to you or flagged that opportunity to you and you're thinking, I don't think I'm ready. What was that conversation like? I'm really interested in
Oh,
that.
that was a really interesting one. I was in a miserable spot. The 10 years were certainly full of so many highlights, but I was working for someone who was probably more on the micromanaging scale, which I don't do particularly well. And
Yeah.
I'd done that thing where I didn't address it head on. I wasn't mature enough in the way
Mm.
that I was dealing with it. So I was kitchen gossiping and bitching and doing all of those things that you 100% should not do, but I was, and I couldn't find my own way out of it. And
Oh,
it appeared like there was no end in sight for me here. So I was starting to look externally. This must be my moment to go. And this manager sort of took me aside and said, "You're miserable," and I said yes, because she was a safe space and I could say that.
yeah.
Um, and proceeded to tell me about this role and this opportunity that had been there. Someone had been in this role for quite some time who was moving on to a different role. It
Mm.
scared the pants off me, the idea
Mm.
of stepping into this role. It was really visible in the business. It was with a
Yeah.
group of people that were not shy and were quite gregarious and very opinionated. And I was going to have to wrangle them to a certain extent and get answers
Mm.
from them on a weekly basis. And I didn't have any experience in that world, and that scared me a lot. But having someone who was so intelligent and really understand the business back me like that was the number one driver that I said yes for. Now, 2 weeks later, I walked into my parents' house and broke into tears and went, "What am I doing? This was a stupid idea." The what the hell zone, as I call it, which is your first sort of 12 to
Yeah.
16 weeks of I'm an idiot, I can't do this, I should have stayed where I was, back in a safe place. That passed pretty quickly, and all of a sudden I realized actually this is where I should have been the whole time, and I'm having an absolute ball. But yeah, I think having advocates for you in the business, people that you really trust to be able to have those conversations and can be in rooms that you're not in as you're going up. I had another mentor at the Good Guys actually. When we were going into New Zealand, after that meeting, our CMO told us there was going to be one person in my team that was going to be looking after the New Zealand account. And I grabbed this person aside and I said, I want to do that. I want the New Zealand gig. Part of my travel nerd, obviously. And she goes, okay, well, just go into the CMO's office and tell them. I can't do that. How could I do that? Why would that's ridiculous? You know, there was not a lot of hierarchy at the Good Guys, but still, for me, people in offices were over there, and I was just this small person over here. And then I sat there thinking about it. I'm like, okay, well, you know, what is there to lose? And so I did it. And I walked in, I knocked on the door, and can I have a moment? And I just want to let you know, I'm really interested in this. I'd love to learn about the market, and I'd be willing to take on the extra work and all of that sort of stuff. And I got a thank you. That's really great to hear. And a week later, I was the person. And I was like, oh, that's really interesting. Advocating for yourself, learning from those people. I think you think that it's really obvious when you're sitting at your own little desk that everyone up in those other offices and in that management table can really see what you're passionate about and where you want to go with your career. But having those conversations can be an absolute game changer.
Yeah, it's such a critical point, and it's something that I do bang on about incessantly, of advocating for yourself, being proactive, and also, to your previous example, putting yourself out there even when it feels scary, and even when the voice in your head is telling you you can't do this, you're not ready, finding a way to kind of, to use the cliche, you know, feel the fear and do it anyway, and actually push through that and make it happen. One of the things that I've observed is two things actually, that often people that have been able to fast track their career are the ones that have been able to do that, are the ones who've been able to go, I'm not entirely sure that I'm ready. I'm not entirely sure that I can do that. But you know what? I'm going to do it anyway. And they've probably done that multiple times over the course of a career. And I think it's easy to assume that those people did it because they felt really confident from the outside. Like, oh, well, of course they did that. They're great. Like, they'd be so confident. Of course they'd put themselves forward. When the reality of the situation was, as you described there, you're screaming on the inside going, oh my God, I don't know if I can do this. But you push through and you do it anyway. And I just think it's such a critical skill, I guess, to kind of master at some point, because it will absolutely change the trajectory of your career, particularly in more hierarchical, sort of larger corporate organizations. Because as you say, people aren't mind readers. They don't know. And just because you said, you know, once 12 months ago on a performance review that you'd maybe quite like to do that, doesn't mean that everyone else knows.
No. And I think the other thing I've found being on the other side, as I sort of think about it now, being in the room where we're having conversations constantly about the structure, you know, I just kind of had this idea that titles and job roles were set in stone, and I will step from this stone to this stone, and then logically I will go from here to there. And I know now when I'm having conversations with my team, I'm like, so what do you want to do? Where do you want to go? Oh, well, I'll probably take that person's job. And I'm like, cool. That could be your option, but talk to me more about the tasks. And I think that's the big thing. I used to get caught up when I don't have language, I feel disempowered. And I thought the language for talking about jobs was job titles. I didn't realize it's about the tasks and about the different roles that you play within your job description. So for me, I love campaigns. I love pulling different ideas together, people from different specializations to tell a story, the whole story. And I like being the person who can see the overview of that. I love cross-functional projects because it's really cool to see something come to life that has a true impact on the business. I couldn't have told you that 10 or 15 years ago. That was something that I had to figure out about myself. But I think if you're struggling to figure out what the next right step is, think about a task where you feel energized and excited to tackle, that's your key indicator for trying to
Yeah.
find a role that captures more of that. If it's the data analytics stuff that you're dragging yourself to, steer clear of CRM and insight roles. But
Yeah.
yeah, that for me was sort of pull yourself towards where you feel those energetic moments.
Yeah, it's such a great insight, and I think it's easy when you're in the day to day, you're on the wheel, you go, you're busy. It can sometimes be a little bit hard to take that step back and try and sort of zoom out and go, what are the tasks that I actually enjoy doing? Like if I could, design my perfect workday, what would that actually look like? Which are the bits that I would pull out? And okay, you're not going to get everything you want. I don't think that the perfect world or the perfect job exists, but by going through that process, you might get 7 out of 10 things that you want, or 8 out of 10 things that you want. And as you said, that also really great insight that you get from more seniority of knowing that job roles and structure isn't actually set in stone, and that there might be a pathway where you can actually create something for yourself if you've been advocating for yourself and you're visible in the business, and of course you're doing a good job and you have credibility and all of those kind of things. But those types of opportunities rarely come to someone who isn't advocating for themselves,
Yeah, agreed.
in my experience.
Absolutely. And it
Yeah.
doesn't, I think, you don't have to be standing on the rooftop shouting it to people.
No,
It can be a
not at all.
really simple, quiet discussion that you have with your
Yeah.
manager as part of your standard one-on-ones that you're having on a fortnightly
Yeah.
or a monthly basis. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, definitely just put it in front of them because conversations are happening all
Yeah.
the time.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Final question, Amy.
The
It
hard
is
one.
always the final question. I know. The only one you get told in advance. And that is, what do you know now that you wish you knew then?
I wish I knew to dream bigger. I
I like that.
didn't realize how close everything was in terms of, as I said, I'm from Geelong. I did the uni thing and I didn't do the uni course that linked you in with the industry. I didn't know about to research the companies that I wanted to work for. I kind of felt like I came into this industry and to marketing generally with a lot of naivety around that.
Mm.
But I think my secret to success has been working hard, being nice to people, and being good at what I do, figuring out what that is, which is usually just asking a bunch of questions and finding better ways to do stuff. If you have that kind of combination, everything's on the table. And I really didn't realize that starting out. So, I probably was never going to be the astronaut that I thought I might have been in grade 2. But it's not necessarily dream bigger that way. But I think within the industry that you can work for the big companies. You can go and travel and live anywhere in the world and work
Yeah.
and play and it really impacts some of this stuff. I mean, I've got to travel to Google and Facebook and be at their head offices. I've worked with some really amazing big companies and launched big campaigns and spent lots of money. It's been really fun and I've thoroughly enjoyed it. But if you'd have asked me back when I was working in my very glamorous carpet manufacturing days, what I would be doing, I would not have mentioned any of this at all. I probably just never realized what was in front of me and what was possible.
Very cool. I like that. I think it's a great piece of advice as well, to not limit yourself, because you actually, as you say, you don't know what's possible. And I suspect as well we kind of do it to ourselves a little bit of we limit what we think we can do, whereas if we were all able to just kind of expand our mindsets a little bit and dream bigger. Words to live by. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for taking the time to chat and sharing so much of your experience and the things that have made a difference for you. Yeah, really enjoyed it, and I think some really useful and interesting insights in there for other people in building their careers too.
And I hope so. I hope my pain can be someone else's gain. I'd love to hear that if that's the case. Thank you. That was a really fun conversation.
You're very welcome.